Many rivers to cross. Oh, hey. Hi, everyone. It's Hermes of Alpha Beta Consulting. Here with your weekly Hewing message. The message that shapes you into who you were meant to be. The you that's fit for purpose. Many rivers to cross. So, what's this many rivers to cross thing? Well, this week's message reminds me of that old Jimmy Cliff hit, Many Rivers to Cross. This week's message is entitled Perseverance. In this age of instant and quick fixes, perseverance is a scarce commodity. In an age where the answers to questions are just a few keystrokes away, perseverance seems to have distanced itself from us. In an age of fads and trending discussions, perseverance might be an attribute for the old and outdated. In an age of instantaneity, perseverance is even harder to come by. To persevere, according to the Oxford Concise Dictionary, is, quote, to continue in a course of action in spite of difficulty or with little or no indication of success, end quote. Wow. To continue with little or no indication of success. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine the futility that often accompanies perseverance? Can you imagine the hopelessness that we experience, the frustration, the dismay? Yet, this is what purpose requires. Purpose requires persisting, continuing, standing firm, notwithstanding the bleak or dismal circumstances around us, notwithstanding the seeming lack of success. Purpose requires us to stand, not on the substance of what we see, but rather on the assurance of the promises of God. Expressed another way, as it's perfectly expressed in Hebrews 11, verse 1, purpose requires faith, which is, quote, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, end quote. But how do we persist? How do we continue? How do we persevere? It's not easy, but it helps if we understand what happens as we persevere. The readings for Proper 26th, the 21st Sunday after Pentecost in Year C, highlight three things. 1. Lament. The first thing that occurs is the lament. This presumes that we have been in the circumstance or the situation for some time. Perseverance is triggered as we perceive the lack of success in our situation or languishing circumstances. Yet, we decide to continue. At this point, we might be inclined to lament, to cry out, to complain, and to express dismay at our circumstances. And so, in the Old Testament reading, Habakkuk 1:1-4, 2:1-4, the prophet complains in chapter 1, verse 2, O Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence and you will not save? The prophet laments the wickedness and corruption of the people. The prophet cries out to God because he is convinced of God's nature. God is a God of mercy, of justice, and of righteousness. God does not enjoy witnessing the evil ways of humanity. The prophet perseveres when he resolves in chapter 2, verse 1, I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me and what he will answer concerning my complaint. Let's now continue to the second thing that happens as we persevere, the reward. In the very reading from Habakkuk, we see the second thing that happens when we persevere. We are rewarded for our persistence. No sooner does the prophet resolve to stand guard than the Lord answers him. In chapter 2, verse 2, we read, Then the Lord answered me and said, Write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that a runner may read it. The lesson? There is reward in our perseverance. The notion of reward for our perseverance is even stronger in the Gospel reading, Luke 19, verses 1 to 10. The story of Jesus and Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector and was rich, as he was described in verse 2. In those days, tax collectors were viewed as traitors by the Jews, for they were Jews collecting taxes from Jews on behalf of the Roman authorities. The Jews did not support the Romans. The Romans were pagans, worshipping many gods. The Jews were monotheists. They worshipped one God. They worshipped Yahweh. What's more, the tax collectors were known for inflating the taxes and pocketing some of the monies collected. So, apart from representing the enemies of the Jews, the tax collectors defrauded their own people. Zacchaeus had heard that Jesus was in town and wanted to see him. Zacchaeus, however, was short and resolved to climb up a sycamore tree to get a view as Jesus passed. Zacchaeus persevered. His perseverance was rewarded when in verse 5 Jesus says, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. Zacchaeus was rewarded, for he not only saw Jesus, but was going to host Jesus at his home. Of course, there was much objection to Jesus' decision, but Zacchaeus' perseverance paid off. Not only that, Zacchaeus also later repented, and this was the real value in his perseverance. So what's the third thing that happens as we persevere? We receive recognition and support. God knows our needs, our physical and emotional needs. As such, as we persevere towards purpose, there will be moments when others will recognize our resolve and determination and will support us. Now, while we do not persevere to receive the recognition and the support, the recognition and the support certainly do make it easier to persevere. In the epistle, for example, 2 Thessalonians 1:1-4 and 11-12, Paul, Silvanus, and Timothy write to the church in Thessalonica. We must always give thanks to God for you, brothers and sisters, as is right, because your faith is growing abundantly, and the love of every one of you for one another is increasing. Therefore, we ourselves boast of you among the churches of God for your steadfastness and faith during all your persecutions and the afflictions that you are enduring. 2 Thessalonians 1:3-4. Now, with such words of encouragement, who wouldn't find it easier to persevere, even in the face of persecution, afflictions, and a seeming lack of success? So now, I've described what happens as we persevere. We often lament, but we do obtain our reward, and others do offer us support. So now I answer the question I asked earlier: how do we persevere? The collect for this week, the opening prayer, reads in part, Almighty and merciful God, it is only by your gift that your faithful people offer you true and laudable service. So then, how do we persist? Only by the gift that God gives us, the grace of God and the power of the Holy Spirit. Friends, until next time, I pray you perseverance as you pursue purpose. I pray you perseverance in love, peace, and joy.